from the malice of our own souls and the evil of our own actions. Whomsoever accepts Allah's guidance will never be misguided, and whomsoever rejects Allah's guidance will never find guidance. I bear witness that there is no deity worthy of worship other than Allah, alone without any partners, and I bear witness that Muhammad is his servant and his messenger. My dear brothers and sisters, please know that if I say anything true or beneficial today, that it comes from Allah, for all truth and benefit come from Him. And if I say anything false or detrimental, then know that it comes from me, for I am human and I'm prone to error. Today is guaranteed to be a good khutbah. It's guaranteed to be a good khutbah because we're going to talk about the Prophet's last khutbah. So it's got to be good, not because of me, but because we're talking about one of his khutbahs. And if his khutbahs aren't good, then whose khutbahs are good? But it's the last khutbah, the last sermon that he ever gave. It was in the 9th day of Dhul Hijjah, the 10th year after Hijrah. So it's about 632, right? The year 632. It was the day of Arafah. So it was the last day of Hajj. It happened to be on a Friday. So it was Hajj season, it was Friday, and it was day of Arafah, the most important day of Hajj. So Jum'ah, and he gave the khutbah. So I'm going to read out the khutbah to you. It's not very long. And then I want to talk about a few things. It's not going to be a deep dive into the last sermon. I just want to highlight a few points. Okay? So after praising God and thanking God, the Prophet ﷺ says, and I quote, "O people, listen well to my words, for I do not know whether after this year I shall ever be amongst you again. Therefore, listen to what I am saying. Listen to what I'm saying to you very carefully, and take those words to those who could not be present here today. O people, just as you regard this month, this day, this city as sacred, so regard the life and property of every Muslim as a sacred trust. Return the goods entrusted to you to their rightful owners. Treat others justly, so that no one would be unjust to you. Remember that you will indeed meet your Lord, and that He will indeed reckon your deeds. God has forbidden you to take usury, riba. Therefore, all riba obligations shall henceforth be waived. Your capital, however, is yours to keep. You will neither inflict nor suffer inequity. God has judged that there shall be no riba, and that all riba due to Abbas ibn Abdul Muttalib shall henceforth be waived. Every right arising out of murder in pre-Islamic days is henceforth waived, and the first such right that I waive is that arising from the murder of Rabi'ah ibn al-Harith ibn Abdul Muttalib. O men, the unbelievers indulge in tampering with the calendar in order to make permissible that which God forbade, and to forbid that which God has made permissible. With God, the months are 12 in number. 4 of them are sacred, 3 of these are successive, and 1 occurs singly between the months of Jumada and Sha'ban. Beware of the devil for the safety of your religion. He has lost all hope that he will ever be able to lead you astray in big things, so be aware of following him in small things. O people, it is true that you have certain rights over your wife, but they also have rights over you. Remember that you have taken them as your wife only under God's trust and with His permission. If they abide by your right, then to them belongs the right to be fed and clothed in kindness. Treat them well and be kind to them, for they are your partners and committed allies. It is your right that they do not make friends with anyone of whom you do not approve, as well as to never be unchaste. O people, listen to me in earnest. Worship God. Perform your daily prayers. Fast during the month of Ramadan and give zakah of your wealth. Perform Hajj if you can afford to. All mankind is from Adam and Eve. An Arab has no superiority over a non-Arab, nor a non-Arab has any superiority over an Arab. Also, white has no superiority over black, and black has no superiority over white except by piety and good action. Know that every Muslim is a brother to every other Muslim, and that the Muslims constitute one brotherhood. Nothing shall be legitimate to a Muslim which belongs to a fellow Muslim unless it was given freely and willingly. Do not, therefore, do injustice to yourselves. Remember, one day you will appear before God, the Creator, and you will answer for your deeds. So beware. Do not stray from the path of righteousness after I am gone. O people, no prophet or messenger will come after me, and no faith will be born. Reason well, therefore, O people, and understand words which I convey to you. I am leaving you with the book of God and my sunnah. If you follow them, you will never go astray. All those who listen to me shall pass on my words to others, and those to others again. And may the last ones understand my words better than those who listen to me directly. Be my witness, O God, that I have conveyed your message to your people. End quote. End of khutbah. And the people all said in unison, we acknowledge. Right? So they were also witnesses that he has conveyed. Then the surah was revealed from Surah Al-Ma'idah, the table spread. The very well-known ayah, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورديت لكم الإسلام دينا. Today I have perfected your religion for you, completed my favors upon you, and have chosen for you Islam as the way of life. Right? As soon as the khutbah was done, this verse was revealed. And when Abu Bakr heard this verse, he started crying. Why did he start crying? This is a verse of finality. This is a verse that pretty clearly suggests something is coming to an end. Right? I have perfected your religion, completed my favors upon you. When a messenger completes their favor, there's nothing left for them to do except to return to Allah. Abu Bakr knew what was coming, and he started crying because of his love for the Prophet ﷺ. And in fact, the Prophet passed away about 3 months later. So that Hajj was his final Hajj. It was the 10th year after Hijrah, and it's known as Hajj al-Wada', the farewell Hajj. And this sermon, this khutbah, is known as the final sermon. I want to talk about a few things. This is not a deep dive into that. I just want to highlight a few things. Because there's a lot of wisdom in this sermon beyond the obvious things. He says some very profound things, but even beyond that, there's a certain logic to it, and there's a certain progression. It's not just a hodgepodge of good advice that the Prophet ﷺ threw together. There's a logic to it, and there's a progression to it. So what was one of the first things that he starts with? He says, treat others justly so that no one would be unjust to you. Remember that you will indeed meet your Lord, and that he will indeed reckon your deeds. And this is a central theme throughout Islam. The idea of justice. The idea of justice. Be just. I've mentioned in many of my khutbahs, during the time of Mecca, the Prophet ﷺ focused on Tawheed, the oneness of God, and social justice, because Mecca was a very unjust society. Very unjust. It was a difficult place to live. If you weren't wealthy or part of a strong family, life was very difficult for you. And so when you live in an unjust society and day-to-day life is a struggle, it's difficult for you to focus on God. It's difficult for you to attach yourself spiritually to God, because day-to-day life is so distracting, it's so difficult. So he starts by talking about justice and therefore injustice. What does he say next, right? And he talks about it on the personal level. Do not be unjust to anyone. So justice on the personal level. What does he say next? God has forbidden you to take riba, usury. Therefore, all the riba obligations shall henceforth be waived. These two things might appear to be unrelated. Now, I don't want to start a civil war, but the issue of riba is a very contentious one in Islam. Many people translate riba as interest, right? And they say that any form of interest is haram, and some scholars take that position. Others translate riba as usury. Usury is a very excessive riba, right? And there are even usury laws, in the West till this day. You can only charge X percentage interest rate. I think it's around 22%, right? So credit cards, they'll max it out, 22%. It's illegal for them to charge you any more than that. What does that have to do with injustice? Riba, back in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, was used to control people. When you hear riba, I don't want you to just think Capital One and MasterCard. I want you to think of the time of the Prophet ﷺ, those who had money would give a loan to those who were desperate, those who were needy. The repayment terms were so out of this world, no one could ever hope to repay it, and the person giving the money knew that would be the case. When you couldn't repay it, they would take you as a slave. They would take your whole family as a slave. So now you're enslaved because you couldn't pay off this one debt, and your kids are enslaved, and then any newborn kids are enslaved, your grandkids, your great-grandkids, right? This was the result of riba. And this is injustice on the societal level. Right? So we started talking about injustice on the personal level. Now there's a progression. He's talking about injustice on the societal level. And one of them is economic injustice. There's physical injustice. You're a slave. There's economic injustice. If you're constantly worried about money, that's a very difficult life. I've been there. I know what it's like. Many of us have money issues. You can't think about anything else when you're worried about making rent, mortgage, credit cards, car payment, student loans. Where's your next meal coming from? It's difficult to focus on God because you're distracted. So there are lessons in this for us. There are lessons for us till this day. We should try to promote laws that are just, that are economically just, so that people aren't economic slaves. Fine, we're not going to have slavery here, but if you spend your whole life just trying to pay off debts, you're living paycheck to paycheck, that's not how Allah wants us to live. So there's wisdom in this, even till now. Economic justice is a major component of justice. So don't be unjust towards anybody else. We should try to promote laws that are economically just. But then a third thing is do not enslave yourself. Do not take on debt that you cannot afford. And I know it's easy to do it here. I remember when I was in college, no job, right? I'm a student in college. I got a Discover card, $5,000 credit limit. Woo! To a broke college student? Ya Allah. That's a lot of money. And then they bumped it up to $7,000. And I didn't ask for it. I didn't ask for a credit limit increase. $7,000, then $10,000. Then they sent me a second card. $10,000 limit. I have $20,000. Alhamdulillah, I didn't max it out. But for a while there, I was living beyond my means. And then I came to my senses. I can't do this. I don't have the income to justify this type of spending. I made myself into a slave. I made myself into an economic slave. Don't do that. That's just a small example. That was just a few $1,000s. Alhamdulillah, I learned my lesson early on. Don't buy that fancy car you can't afford, that big house you can't afford, those expensive vacations. There's nothing that will bring you more pleasure than knowing that your debt is under control. You have little to no debt. No material thing can bring you more pleasure than being assured that your debts don't own you, that you own your debts. And it's not easy in this world where consumerism is all around us. Buy this, buy that, you deserve this, get that. You can't afford it, payment terms. We'll finance it. right? Just buy. Do not live your life as an economic slave. Allah didn't want anyone else to make you a slave. Don't make yourself into a slave. Now, these are all very practical day-to-day things. Remember, this is the final sermon. This is the final sermon. If you're on your deathbed, you're in the hospital, you know you're going to pass away, and your friends and family, they're coming to see you, you're going to choose the most important things to say to them. You're going to prioritize. What are the most important things that I have to say to the people that I care about the most? Those that have cared about me. He hasn't spoken about heaven. He hasn't spoken about hell. He hasn't spoken about God. He's speaking about injustice. He's talking about riba, economic injustice. Very practical, pragmatic, day-to-day advice. I remember I read an article several years ago asking Americans, it was a survey, what's the most stressful thing for you in your life? I was shocked at the answer. It wasn't job, it wasn't health, it wasn't terrorism, it was Christmas shopping. Wallahi, I kid you not. Christmas shopping. The expectations are so high, you're expected to spend so much money, and the time and effort it takes to go and buy these things, and with money that you don't really have, I couldn't believe it. Right? This isn't my words. But it's economic enslavement. Do not do this to yourselves. It will distract you from your true purpose in life. At the end of the day, it'll just make you miserable. All right, so now we're talking about justice at a societal level, including economic justice. What does he go on to talk about next? Beware of the devil for the safety of your religion. He has lost all hope that he will ever be able to lead you astray in big things, so beware of following him in small things. Do you know the story of the frog? It's not a story in the Quran, it's an anecdote. Okay. If you throw a frog into a pot of hot water, the frog's going to know that, hey, this is a pot of hot water. It's going to jump out, run away, you'll never catch it. That's not how you boil a frog. You put the frog into a pot of room temperature water. It thinks it's a pool. And then you turn on the heat. You put it on low. Don't put it on high. Put it on low. Oh, this is a nice warm bath, the frog is thinking. This is nice, right? It gets a little hotter. Oh, this is a hot tub. This is really nice. Before it knows it, the water's boiling, and its muscles have now cooked, and now the frog can't do anything, right? Because now the frog is boiled. It sneaks up on you. This is how the shaitan is going to come after you. Anybody here going to go rob a bank? Okay, right? Because you know that's wrong. The shaitan is not going to come to you and say, rob a bank. He knows that's going to fail. You're too good for that. But FYI, if you do, be sure to make a donation to MakeSpace, inshallah. But he's not going to do that. He's not going to do that. He's going to get you to do something small. I remember I saw one time, I was at a restaurant. I was out with my friends. The people next to us, they left a tip. And this other guy from this other table got up, looked around, no one was looking, took the tip for himself. He wasn't the server, he was just one of the people eating at the restaurant. Just a little thing, it's just $2-3. Just $2-3, right? That's how the shaitan is going to get you. He's going to get you with little things. And the little things snowball and they become bigger and bigger things. So be wary. Be wary of the little things. Okay? So now, talking about justice at a personal level, justice at a societal level, he's talking about the shaitan. Be careful of the shaitan. He's going to try to get you with the little things, and the little things become big things. What does he talk about next? He talks about your spouse. Remember that you have taken your wife only under God's trust and with his permission, and to treat them well and be kind. And they are your allies. They're your partners. So now, inshallah, hopefully you have a just society. You're avoiding little sins. You're avoiding the big sins. What's the next step? Now we're building. There's a progression here. So one day, inshallah, you're going to get married. You're going to have a spouse. Treat them well. They are your partner. That spouse is a gift from Allah. They're not yours. Treat them well. So now you have a just society, inshallah, and now the family. He's talking about family. The family is the building block of society in Islam. It's the family. You know, in many Western societies, they're hyper individualistic, and they think that the building block of society is the individual. And there are certainly some good points to that, right? I'm not trying to dog the West. There are some very valid points to that. There are some benefits to that. But Islam concerns itself with family, because family is the real building block of society. If families are strong, society is strong. If families are weak, societies are weak. So now we're progressing from society to the building block of society. Family. Treat your spouse well. And by extension, treat your kids well, treat your extended family well, treat those that are around you well. They'll treat you well. What does the Prophet ﷺ talk about next? He says, "O people, listen to me in earnest. Worship God. Perform your 5 daily prayers. Fast during the month of Ramadan. Give zakat. Perform hajj if you can afford to." We finally get to something that, kind of resembles what we traditionally think of when we think about Islam. Now he's finally talking about the rituals after all these other things. And this progression mirrors what happened in society. When the Prophet came, fasting didn't come until later. Prayer didn't come until later. Hajj didn't come until later. But Tawheed and social justice were there from day one. So the progression of the khutbah is actually following his prophethood. We finally get to some of the rituals. If I would have asked many of you, the last sermon, assuming that you hadn't heard it, what do you think the first thing would have been that the Prophet's talking about in the last sermon? It's the last one. He's going to get to talk to everyone at the same time. Oh, it must have been prayer, certainly, right? No, prayer is coming later. The rituals are coming later. They're important. I'm not trying to say that they're not important, right? Perform the rituals. And then, now you have something to do, something specific to Islam. You have rituals. And Allah now talks about rank. All mankind is from Adam and Eve. An Arab is not superior to a non-Arab, and vice versa. A white is not superior to a black, and vice versa. Only in piety and good action. Taqwa wal a'mal al-husna. To be conscious of God and to do good deeds. That's how Allah measures you. That's how you're going to be judged on the day of judgment. Doesn't matter where you're from. Doesn't matter what family you're from. Doesn't matter what skin color you have. Doesn't matter how much money you made. Doesn't matter what ethnicity you are. None of that matters. How conscious were you of God, and how many good deeds did you do? So now we're progressing further. Adjust the soil for a just society. Talks about avoiding sin. Talks about the family and your spouse, the building block of a good society. Okay, now what are you going to do? What are you going to do now? Allah knows that mankind naturally wants to excel in certain things. We want to compete in certain things. That's why we play sports. We love competing. It's natural. It's natural. You're going to want to do good. You're going to want to do really, really well. Some are going to want to be exceptional. And that's okay. But Allah's directing you. He's telling you what to be exceptional in. These worldly things that other people emphasize, don't worry about that. It's of no value. Be conscious of God and do good deeds. That's what it truly means to excel. Right? So have a proper measuring stick. Don't be distracted by certain aspects of this life. ادعوا إلى الله يغفر لكم ذنوبكم. Supplicate to Allah to forgive your sins. My dear brothers and sisters, one of the last things that the Prophet ﷺ said in his final sermon, he said, "All those who listen to me shall pass on my words to others, and those to others again, and may the last ones understand my words better than those who listen to me directly. So the progression, he came from an unjust society, a harsh society. Make it a just society. Physically, economically, in every type of way, make it a just society. Avoid small sins. Be good to your spouse. You're going to try to excel and do good? Fine. This is my definition of doing good. He's giving us a path forward. There's a logical progression to this. And then at the end of all of that, all right, now you guys know what to do. And gals, you know what to do now. I've laid a basic framework for your life. Take my words to others. Now, what does that mean? Does that just mean repeat the last sermon? Well, we've done that now, right? Collectively, we have fulfilled that obligation. But it also means to set a good example. That's how you really pass on the words of the Prophet, is by living a righteous, ethical life and setting a proper example. And now we have progressed full circle. If you look at the life of every prophet, peace be upon them all, what did they do? They delivered a message and they set a good example. Delivered a message, set a good example. And now he's worked his way to that in this khutbah. Everything that he said, all of those prior things, it all works up to you being a good person and setting a good example for those around you. You set a good example for your spouse, for your kids, for your schoolmates, for your colleagues at work, for strangers on the street, whatever. You set a good example. And that's kind of at the end. That's now the pinnacle. You can't set a good example if you didn't have all these other things in place. I'll tell you another quick story. Also in college, right? So remember the credit card that I got? That same house that I lived in when I got that credit card. I lived on a street. It was next to the masjid. The masjid was maybe like a 30, 45-second walk on the same street. The house that I lived in, it was an older house. It was an investment property. The owners had converted it into 4 different units. It was originally just a regular house designed for one family, but it was in a good location, so the owners split it up into 4 units, 2 downstairs, 2 upstairs. I had one of the upstairs units. I went to the landlord's house a few times to give my rent check, spoke to him, nice guy, kind of a rural guy. He owned horses and things of that nature. I don't think he had ever been outside of the United States. I don't think he had ever been outside of the Midwest, to be honest. So he didn't have too much exposure, right? But this man loved Muslims. That entire house, all 4 units were occupied by Muslims because the masjid was 30, 45 seconds away. This was in Morgantown, West Virginia, by the way. It's my hometown, Morgantown, West Virginia. And he said to me, I will rent out this house exclusively to Muslims. Like, I love you guys. You pay your rent on time. You don't destroy the place. You don't play loud music. You don't party. You don't drink. I love you guys. Just when you leave, find me another tenant, and I'll reserve this house exclusively for Muslims. We never once spoke to this man about theology. We never once tried to convert him. We never once lectured him about Islam. We just set a good example, and he was naturally drawn to us. He was inquiring with us about Islam. So I ended up speaking to him quite a bit about Islam, but every time it was him asking me. We just set a good example was all we did, and it created a very positive impression. Right? That's how we should hope to live our lives, where people see us and they say, wow, I really like you. There's something great about you. What is it? And then they get to know you're a Muslim, and your character is an expression of your faith. You know who was like this for me? My father, Allah yarham. He passed away about 10 years ago. My father's my hero. My father, when we came here, he was 42 years old. We were doing well in Egypt, but he saw a lot of corruption, things happening. He was in the military. He was pretty high up. He said, I want something different for my kids. He came here. We lived in Gainesville, Florida. He got his PhD in mechanical engineering. He was an engineer back in Egypt. He started over again. I remember him telling me stories. Hazem, I was competing with people literally half my age. Starting a PhD program at 42, his English wasn't that great. He said, I had to work twice as hard as everybody else. My dad was a very pious man, a very religious man, but you'd never know it by looking at him or talking. You'd have to get to know him. He never wore his religion on his sleeve. He didn't have a beard. He didn't wear the, right, there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with any of that, but that's just not what he did. He set a good example. And everybody loved my father. Rida Muhammad Bata. Everybody loved him. That's the approach that I take. I don't wear my religion on my sleeve. There's nothing about me that says, look, I'm a Muslim. But hopefully when people interact with me, they see something good. And then it eventually comes out. It just naturally comes out. You get to know someone, where you're from, oh, you're a Muslim, right? Comes out. That's how we can follow the Prophet's advice and pass on his words, the character that he instilled in us. That's how we can pass it on. Just be a good person, set a good example to all of those around you. Ramadan is just around the corner. May Allah accept your fasting, right? We'll make early dua. Muslims were late for so many things. We're going to make early dua. May Allah accept our fasting, inshallah. Inshallah, hopefully spiritually, may you be prepared to make the most of this Ramadan. Allahumma aghfir lil muslimina wal muslimat wal mu'minina wal mu'minat al ahya'i minhum wal amwat annaka sami'un mujibu da'wat. Almighty Allah, forgive the Muslim men and women. Forgive the righteous men and women, those who are alive and those who have passed. You are indeed the one who listens and accepts all supplications. عباد الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. Indeed, Allah urges us to be just and to excel in what we do, be generous and to take care of our kin and relatives, never do what is forbidden of all sins, and do not transgress. He, the Almighty, advises you so you can remember. Waqim as-salah.